So hi John, my name's Kieran. How you doing? You all right?
I am fine. Are you all right? I
Oh,
understand you had a bit of a dust up.
yeah, I'm doing okay. I just came out of a bit of a black eye and I lost my phone. So I'm glad we're
Oh
not doing
boy,
a video camera call.
boy.
You know,
Uh,
so look like a bit of a
at,
ruffian.
at, at least you're mostly okay. I'm glad about that. I was really disturbed to hear what happened to you, so I'm glad you're okay now.
Yeah, I'm okay. It was a bit scary at the time, but I'm okay now. You know.
I bet. Well, thank you for having me and interviewing me with regard to the magazine. Um,
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. It's our pleasure. We're always looking for people to come on, especially in, different ways and using different mediums. So, I should explain we are using Zoom now. So, just for the audience or people that have so kindly clicked to listen to the recording. If our voices are going over the top of each other, I will try, and I'm sure John will try to mitigate that wherever we can. But it's because we're using a Zoom call and we're probably, thousands of miles apart right now. So we're doing quite well so far. Um, but yeah, I mean, it'll be just a very sort of laid back interview, really. We had a few questions we wanted to ask you, then John, and then if there's anything you think we've left out or anything you want to impart over, at the end, that's brilliant. I mean, obviously, we did originally want to ask you mostly about your new book, Small Talk, but since that, a lot of other things have come up. Just about you as a writer, really, and get to know you a little bit as well. 'Cause I think it's always important if we're going to put a little bit of an interview together that we get a little bit of that in there as well. Um, because it's always great, I think, especially me as I mean, I'm not so much like the poet really. In this, it's more sort of Mark's bag that, but certainly when I read writings, I know what affects me, and certainly yours does that, and often in quite deep ways. Um, and that's why I feel sort of privileged to be able to step into this role and interview you today. I'm more of a sort of a website geek, So yeah, thanks for having the opportunity to be able to interview you today.
well, this is my pleasure, and it's funny how we initially made our connection. I saw a post of a video of our mutual friend, the great writer Milner Place.
Yes.
And Milner, I really do miss the man.
Mm.
Um, he and I had a a small connection for a number of years, and I was very proud and pleased to have had Milner write the introduction to one of my books. And it was interesting, as great and as well known in some circles, as well known as Milner was, uh, he was actually quite shy and nervous about writing the introduction to my book. And I found that very interesting. I thought, here is this man who I considered to be one of the great poets of modern time, and he was scared to write an interview. I almost had to push him into the room to get him to do it because he didn't feel he was good enough for it.
Wow.
And I thought, man, if somebody with the talent of Milner Place still has doubts about himself and his ability, what does that say about all these other little pissant writers who are running around calling themselves poets, calling themselves great writers, and someone like Milner, who actually is a great writer, has doubts and fears. And at the end of the day, I just felt very honored that he wrote that introduction for me.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, for me, I had the awesome task of being able to sort of split up the separate poems from Mark's. Mark's got a cassette tape, and he managed over time to be able to get those tape recordings put into a more futuristic format, if you will. And we just had one continuous sort of wave file, and I had to go through each one and split them up basically so that we could have the bus and all the individual poems in separate files, and yeah, that was really awesome. Writing for me, and like I said, similar to your work, certainly took me to places in my mind, and in turn then the feelings rising up, deep feelings of love, passion, and things like that that certainly I wouldn't have expected, like I haven't really got into the sort of world of poetry in my life. I am a Buddhist and things like that, and I do consider feelings quite often, and my own feelings, and what feelings are true and what aren't, and doing meditations and stuff like that. And certainly reading something or hearing something spoken like that, it's certainly somewhat more than talent just there, I do feel that way quite strongly, that it's not a talent, that there's something else there. I'm trying to delete my own sort of my own Yorkshire tones, if you will, for the recording. I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm just conscious at the moment that I'm trying to do that. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's being recorded. I'm kind of not talking slang or something, like that. It's kind of strange, really. But yeah. So yeah. But yeah, we'll crack on anyway. I'm hoping really that the first question here that I've got here will touch on some of what we spoke about. But yeah, I'm just wondering really what poets have been the biggest influences, on your current writing, and in the areas that you're writing at the moment, John.
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and my answer is always a bit of a detour, in that the people that influence me the most might not necessarily be poets. And I talk about this a lot. I've learned a lot about my writing, about poetry especially, from people like the musician Miles Davis. Are you familiar with Miles Davis?
Yes, we are.
Well, his music taught me, in regard to my poetry, a lot about the proper use of silence. Silence for a writer, silence and that whole white area on the page is just as important as the words you're putting down. Because for a writer, knowing what not to say is important, as what you have to say. And people like Miles Davis taught me a lot. I've learned a lot from also, old time movies, film noir, from cheap dime novels, from watching Groucho Marx, the old Marx Brothers movies.
Wow.
Things like that inform my poetry just as much as any other writers do. But for strictly writers, I think I've learned a lot from, of course, people like Bukowski. I learned a lot from Milner, because of the way he uses language with such color and power. I learned a lot from people like Jack Kerouac, and there's so many different influences on my life and work.
Yeah, I can totally get that. Yeah, I mean, for me, like, the last thing you touched on there was about the power, the power of sort of Milner's work, and it's, for me, it's a sort of, it's the way it runs as well, isn't it, with Milner? You know, it's like it is so powerful, but in another sense, it's like being hit with a baseball bat, isn't it? You're like you're whacked with a word, and then another one follows it that, you know, just totally expecting and not expecting in a way, you know, and you seem to take you deeper and deeper into the you know, into the sort of poem. You know, I don't know. That is definitely some of that I felt from his work, and I haven't overstudied it, you know. You know, but for me, certainly, I'm receiving that as you're saying. You know, that I totally identify that, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
It sounds like a real work of love that you're doing, and I'm very grateful that you are doing that.
Yeah.
Um, um, I see what you're looking at. Some of the questions that we have upcoming. I see where you have a quote here. I don't know who the quote is from. It says, "Talent burrows, genius steals." That made me think of Bob Dylan, and
Yeah.
there's a whole cottage industry tied around people trying to figure out where Bob Dylan got his or continues to get his inspiration from, like his new album. There's quote after quote after quote, and he uses this way of tying together the past and making it new, fresh, exciting. Wasn't it Ezra Pound that always said, "Make it new"? And I think that's what, as writers, we always try to do. You stand on the shoulders of people who came before us, whether we're writers or artists or musicians. You use what came in the past and build on that.
Yeah, I think for me also, being a Buddhist sort of on a lighter tone is, you know, it's sort of a good idea never to make the same mistakes twice as well. You know, always make a new mistake is best. You know?
Uh, that's interesting that you mention being a Buddhist. Someone that I know who also has the same philosophy mentioned how much my poetry means to them because of the way it I kind of, it sounds like bragging, but I have no other way to put it into words. But she said that my poetry has a very concise, almost Zen feel to it. That
Absolutely. We said as much. Both me and Mark have said well, almost the exact words that you just said about this new, you know, the new book, the small talk book. Is that it's straight to the point, it wastes nothing, you know, and it is very Zen like. You know, I've said that to Mark on a number of occasions. You know, there were in particular seven of the poems that were picked out in particular, um, the ones that I'd sort of read, where that one in particular the case, you know, and that's sort of an interest of mine anyway, you know, koans and things like that.
I, I really appreciate that. That I can't tell you how much that means to me. It makes me feel like maybe in some small way I've accomplished what I was setting out to do. People ask, you know, they often ask, why do you write? Do you feel compelled to write? And I think compelled is too fancy of a word. It's, you know, I write for the same reasons, you know, people go out and paint houses, for the reason why people go to work every day. This is just what I do every day. There's no compelling, there's no thinking about it. It just is. You are who you are, and this is who I am.
Well, I was going to say that, yeah, it just is, you know, and then obviously the undercurrent to that is a sort of a hope or a will a will that under the sort of imprint of that, or the imprint of the in particular poem that you're writing, that someone might get something out of it, or maybe something close to what you're feeling at the time of writing it, right?
Yeah, yeah. When I was a kid, when I was a young man, I used to think about writing the big poem, big in quotation marks, something huge and memorable. And then I reached a point where I came to an understanding that the big poem really doesn't exist. The big poem really is in how you approach your writing and your life. The big poem is that stupid little hair on the tip of your nose that keeps on coming back. The big poem is in going out in the backyard and cleaning out the dog crap that your dog left out there. That's the big poem. All those little things combined together, for me, make the big poem. And I see in your questions here, you talk about, do you write every day? And the answer is yes. I talk to kids, young people, students, aspiring writers who ask me, do I wait for inspiration? And I don't know a nice way to answer that other than to say you don't wait for anything. You go out and you do the work every day, every single day. And if you're lucky enough to find inspiration, that's just icing on the cake. But the important thing is doing your job every day and doing it to the best of your ability.
And there's got to be some sort of aspect of, you're writing from your own experience, right? So, if you're waiting for something to happen, then you're waiting for more experience to happen before you write, which is, I suppose, the opposite way around, because you're gonna gain more experience surely by writing, and putting it out there,
Exactly. You can't wait for it to happen. You just can't wait. I don't believe in inspiration. I don't believe in a muse, although my muse is, my wife, my dog, my life. Any writer uses what's available to them.
So yeah, we seem to be getting through them quite well anyway, without even mentioning the actual question. So I'll just try one. So what do you think a poetry in translation, can it ever remain faithful to the original as small talk's been translated? Has small talk been translated yet?
That's a really good question. I'm hoping for some foreign editions of my books, and I've had individual poems that have been published in various languages, many languages, but never whole books. And it scares me because that control is out of my hands.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they could be faithful. I have a friend, he's translated Pablo Neruda, not Garcia Lorca's poet in New York. And I never liked Lorca. I never understood or appreciated Garcia Lorca until my friend Mark translated it. And he explained to me that translation isn't a literal, word for word thing. If you're doing that, you're losing the feeling of a poem, of a book, a song, whatever, that you have to get deep inside the work and carry over that feeling, not necessarily the words. I see up on the screen here, among the many writers you've mentioned, I see Billy Collins' name. going back to my first book back in 1971. Billy Collins and I had the same publisher back then.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
With
on
the
the
same
wall right here
publisher.
in front of me. Mark has the beautiful, collage of the writers that have most influenced him, or most, who he likes to read, or whatever, and his picture is one of them. So he's looking at me right now, and so yeah, that's I mean, that's certainly interesting to me, because I know some of Mark's work's been translated, and I know he's come up against sort of issues around, certain phrases that were totally untranslatable, and
Yeah, yeah.
sent around, bounding back and forward, trying to translate certain aspects of it. And for me also, in what you've said around, my own life, and my own teachings and things, it's certainly in the feeling, and it's certainly subjective also, isn't it? Because what I can get sort of 6 or 7, different translations of, say, the Upanishads, and or sort of a religious work like that, and who's to say what is true, and certainly by that then denotes what you're saying. Certainly you would expect something to be lost from the person there sat there writing it, and so yeah.
Boy, this is really interesting talking to you. You mentioned the Upanishads. And the other day I was reading a book that meant a lot to me as a young man, by I don't know if you're familiar with it, by Paramahansa Yogananda, the
No, I
autobiography of a
am.
yogi.
Sorry, I am. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that book meant a whole lot to me as a young man. Um,
Wow. It's all sorts, doesn't it? So many connections in there.
yeah,
You
I
know.
I had a little blue edition of that book, autobiography of a yogi. It was probably 3.5, 4 inches by 3.5 or 4 inches, with his picture on the front cover. Okay, I still have that up on my shelves right now.
Yeah, and he travelled on the train, right? Is that the right one?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and left his lineage and wanted to find out more. Yeah, beautiful writings, such deep sentiment as well, and even at a young person, he was really naive, though, in a way, in many respects, but in others he was very forward thinking, and to do that, to do that, to sneak away, and to sort of do that and make his whole life works, really, into this one single sort of moment. But yeah, very beautiful book, very beautiful book.
Are you familiar with the writings of Alan Watts?
Oh gosh, yeah, am I? Yeah, it's changed my life.
I've
Yeah.
got a copy of one of his earliest books. It was called Zen, Beat Zen, and Square Zen.
Oh, no way. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yep, that's sitting on my bookshelf.
Wow.
It was saddle stitch, and it was probably from the late 50s, and it's
Oh my God. That is
yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yep. Zen, Beat Zen, and Square Zen. Book means a
Mm.
lot to me.
I've heard little outtakes for these early books. And there's a lot of YouTube stuff out there now that he's done. And I religiously listen to stuff all the time on YouTube, even every night when I go to sleep, I'll pick up some Alan Watts. Um,
Uh,
so that's really awesome that you mentioned that, actually, for sure.
uh,
So yeah,
Poetry is the lifeblood of many countries. I can't say it's the case for America, In America, it seems that every other person wants to be a poet or calls themselves a poet. In fact, you can walk out into your backyard right now and pick up a big rock, and you'll find 10 poets fighting for land space with the 5 artists. Finding a real poet like Milner Place is a rare, rare thing indeed, which is why, as a writer, now I'm 70 years old now, and since I was probably in my early 20s, I have refused to call myself or identify myself as a poet because I always figured it's too easy for people to prove you're wrong. So I thought I would just do the work and let the work stand on its own. So my best hope for the book, Small Talk, and the title means a lot to me, Small Talk, in that, like your comments and feelings on Zen, it's those little things that hide the important things in life. So small talk, those little details, they mean a lot to me, and they should mean a lot to everybody. Don't go running around looking for the big idea, the big answer, or the big solution. Just take things a day at a time. It's like getting back to what we were talking about earlier. If you're doing the dishes or scrubbing the floors, make that into your poem. Do that the best you can. Put your entire being into that, and that's the answer right there. I never met Milner, although we had corresponded for years, and like I said, he did the introduction to one of my books. He was a real treasure, a real gentleman. As I said to you in an email, whenever I read or read Milner's work, I got the image of old sepia-toned photographs. And there was something classic and timeless and equally futuristic about his work. And I applaud you guys for what you're doing to make people aware of his work. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, I did want to just ask you one more question, if that's possible.
That's fair enough.
On there before. Certainly, if only about the title, for me, as a sort of a like I've said, I don't read a lot of poetry. I do now, but prior to now, you know, in doing submissions and stuff like that with the website and helping Mark, from that poem, to me also denotes, you know, sitting on the back of the bus listening to other people's small talk, you know. It's not as direct, it's not always as direct, is it? You know, it's like almost like someone else's small talk's always going to be more interesting than my own, you know.
If I can jump in here, and then I will leave.
Yeah.
We seem to have a lot in connection, a lot of understandings, because small talk, my poetry to me is kind of like, if you called it sitting on a bus, I picture sitting on a train, looking out the windows on a train, and you see the world passing in front of you through that little square of the window. And you've got to understand that there's a whole lot of other things going on beyond what you can see. And my poems are like the images of those images passing by as you go down through the road.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for giving us your time, and it's been absolutely amazing to be able to speak to you.
Thank you. You folks made